Trust in managers has collapsed by 37% in just 2 years, from 46% in 2022 to just 29% in 2024. That's not a trend. That's a leadership crisis. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The biggest obstacle standing between you and effective leadership isn't your competition, your budget, or your team. It's your ego. Right now, 71% of people who take on leadership roles report that it significantly increased their stress levels, and 72% of leaders admit they feel used up by the end of each day. But here's what the research actually shows. It's not the workload destroying these leaders. It's their ego preventing them from leading effectively. When your ego takes control, you stop listening to feedback. You dismiss ideas that aren't yours. You make decisions to protect your image instead of serving your team, and your organization pays the price. A recent Harvard Business Review study analyzed nearly 2,000 leaders across 18 industries. The leaders rated as most effective by their colleagues weren't the loudest voices in the room. They weren't the ones taking credit for every win. They were the most self-reflective, the most willing to admit mistakes, the most open to learning. In fact, of all 340 leadership traits measured, I frequently spend time reflecting on my past successes and failures, had the highest score among top performers. That's not weakness. That's strength. Today, we're breaking down 3 strategies that elite leaders use to check their ego and build unstoppable teams. Before we dive in, if you're serious about leveling up your leadership game, hit that subscribe button. We break down Fortune 500 strategies every week that you can actually use. And if you're getting value from this already, drop a comment with where you're leading from. Startup founder, middle management, or climbing the corporate ladder. Strategy number 1. Practice. Extreme ownership. Let's start with a principle that separates average leaders from exceptional ones. Extreme ownership. Here's what this looks like in practice. In 2024, Boeing's leadership crisis became a masterclass in what not to do. When safety issues emerged, with the 737 MAX, CEO Dave Calhoun initially deflected responsibility, pointing to inherited problems and external factors. The result? Trust collapsed, stock prices plummeted, and he was forced to resign. Now, contrast that with how Satya Nadella approached leadership when he took over at a struggling company. Instead of blaming previous leadership or market conditions, he immediately took ownership of the culture problem. He publicly acknowledged that the company had become complacent and siloed. He admitted the leadership team, including himself, needed to fundamentally change how they operated. Here's the key difference. When leaders deflect blame, teams become defensive. When leaders take ownership, teams take action. Research from 2025 shows that only 29% of employees trust their immediate managers to set them up for success. That's down from 46% just 3 years ago. Why? Because when problems arise, most leaders ask, "Who messed up?" instead of, "How can I solve this?" Start your next team meeting with this question. If our results aren't where we want them, what could I be doing differently as a leader to set you up for success? This simple shift moves the conversation from blame to solutions. When a project fails, resist the urge to identify the weak link on your team. Instead, ask yourself, did I provide clear direction? Did I ensure they had the right resources? Did I create an environment where they felt safe asking for help? Extreme ownership doesn't mean you're responsible for every outcome. It means you refuse to use your team as an excuse. This is how you build trust, and trust is the foundation of high-performing teams. Strategy number 2. Seek feedback. Like your career, depends on it. Actively seek feedback, especially when it's uncomfortable. Here's a hard truth. Your ego doesn't want feedback. It wants confirmation. And that's exactly why feedback is so powerful. In January 2024, a study tracking 610 leaders across 21 job functions found something fascinating. The leaders who regularly sought feedback from their peers and direct reports were promoted 20% faster than those who didn't. Not because they were more talented, but because they were more coachable. Think about that CEO I mentioned earlier who had to step down from a leadership role after alienating their entire team. They wrote in Fortune magazine about their biggest mistake, believing they were an expert who had all the answers. They called it their Dunning-Kruger moment, thinking they knew everything when they actually knew very little. It took 700 days of failure before they realized their ego was preventing them from accessing the collective intelligence of their team. Fast forward to today, they now run a $4 billion company. The difference? They now ask for feedback constantly. They acknowledge they don't have all the answers. They've built a culture where admitting "I don't know" is seen as strength, not weakness. Here's your action plan. This week, schedule a 15-minute one-on-one with someone you depend on, a peer, your boss, or a direct report. Ask them this specific question. What's one thing I do that makes your job harder, and one thing I do that makes it easier? Do not defend yourself. Do not explain your reasoning. Just listen and say, "Thank you." Then, and this is critical, implement at least one change based on that feedback within the next week. Show them you actually listened. This creates a feedback loop that transforms your leadership effectiveness. Research from 2025 shows that companies with leaders who actively seek feedback have 3.4 times more engaged employees. That's not a small difference. That's transformational. Quick question: what's the hardest feedback you've ever received as a leader? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I'll share some insights in our community post this week. And if you haven't hit that like button yet, do it now. It helps us reach more leaders who need to hear this message. Strategy number 3, elevate others' success. Over your own, make your people's success more important than your own visibility. This is where ego shows its true colors. When someone on your team wins, does your first thought go to how you contributed, or do you immediately shine the spotlight on them? In 2024, researchers at the University of Colorado Boulder studied 610 leaders and discovered something counterintuitive. Leaders who actively promoted their team members' achievements and deflected credit were actually promoted faster than those who self-promoted. They called it the humble route to leadership advancement. Here's why it works. When you elevate others, you build a network of supporters. When you self-promote, you create competitors. One path is sustainable, the other is fragile. Look at how Pfizer's Chief Corporate Affairs Officer Sally Sussman approached the COVID vaccine development. Instead of positioning Pfizer as the hero, she consistently highlighted the collaborative effort across pharmaceutical companies. She emphasized how competitors work together for the greater good. The result? Pfizer's reputation soared while maintaining strong industry relationships. Contrast that with leaders whose egos demand constant recognition. A 2025 study found that narcissistic leaders have significantly higher team turnover rates. Why? Because talented people don't want to work for someone who takes credit for their ideas and contributions. Here's how you practice this immediately. In your next team meeting, before you share any updates or wins, ask each team member to share something they accomplished this week. Then publicly connect their work to your organization's bigger goals. Say something like, "The reason we hit our quarterly target is directly because of Sarah's work on X and Tom's innovation on Y." When you're in meetings with senior leadership, bring your team members with you. Let them present their own work. When executives ask you questions about a project, turn to your team member and say, "Actually, Jamie led this initiative. Jamie, can you walk them through your approach?" This does two things. It develops your team's leadership skills, and it signals to senior leadership that you're a talent developer, not just a talent hoarder. Research from 2025 shows that leaders who consistently elevate their team members create organizations that are 25% more innovative. Why? Because people feel safe taking risks when they know their leader will support them regardless of the outcome. All right, let's bring this all together with your actionable game plan. Week 1, practice extreme ownership. In your next team meeting, take ownership of any current challenges. Ask, "What can I do differently?" Document your commitments and follow through. Week 2, seek feedback. Schedule 3 15-minute feedback conversations. Ask the specific question I gave you earlier. Listen without defending. Implement at least one change by the end of the week. Week 3, elevate others. Make it your mission to publicly recognize 3 team members' contributions. Connect their work to organizational goals. Look for opportunities to bring them into high-visibility situations. Here's the powerful part. When you do these 3 things consistently, your ego transforms from your enemy into your ally. Because checking your ego doesn't mean eliminating confidence. It means redirecting that confidence toward building something bigger than yourself. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 3 strategies will you implement first this week? Drop your answer in the comments. Are you going with extreme ownership, active feedback, or elevating others. And if you found this valuable, share it with one other leader in your network who needs to hear this message. Leadership isn't a solo sport. The leaders who advance fastest aren't the smartest people in the room. They're the ones willing to check their ego, learn constantly, and build others up. That's what we explore every week here on the C-Suite Playbook. Fortune 500 strategies that actually work in the real world. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. We're building a community of leaders who are serious about leveling up without the corporate BS.
This is the C-Suite Playbook, where Fortune 500 strategies meet actionable insights. Your competitive advantage starts here.